The sky was still deciding what color it wanted to be when I pulled into the driveway. That thin, early light, neither night nor morning, hung over the house like a held breath. The engine clicked as it cooled, loud in the quiet. I sat there a moment longer than necessary, my hands wrapped around the steering wheel, listening to nothing happen. The casserole dish rested on the passenger seat, covered in foil. I had wrapped it in a towel to keep it warm. By then, it was already losing the fight. Snow lined the edges of the driveway, packed down and gray from last week. Someone had shoveled recently, not me. I stepped out, my boots crunching softly, the sound too sharp for how early it was. The house looked the same. Blue paint dulled by winter, the porch rail slightly crooked on the left. I noticed the porch light was off. It used to be on when she knew I was coming. I climbed the steps slowly, balancing the dish against my hip. The wood creaked beneath my feet. It creaked the same way it always had, like it remembered who I was. At the door, I shifted the casserole to one arm and reached into my coat pocket. My fingers closed around the key without looking. I'd carried it for years, never thought about it. It was just there. I slid it into the lock. It didn't go. I pulled it out and tried again, slower this time, angling it the way I always had. The metal scraped, wrong and hollow. I felt it immediately, that resistance that doesn't come from rust or cold. I leaned closer, squinting at the lock. It was new, brighter, unfamiliar. I tried once more, just in case my hands were stiff. The key refused me again. For a moment, I stood very still. The casserole tilted slightly in my arm, heat bleeding through the towel. I adjusted it automatically, the way you do when your body keeps working before your mind catches up. I looked at the door, then at the handle, then back at the lock. The house didn't move. It didn't explain itself. I knocked softly, just my knuckles brushing the wood, polite, the way you knock when you're sure someone will answer. Nothing. I knocked again, a little firmer. The sound traveled inside, dull and swallowed. I imagined it moving through the hallway, past the coat rack, past the kitchen table where she used to do her homework. I waited. Behind the curtain in the front window, something shifted, just a fraction, fabric drawing in, then stopping. My chest tightened, slow and quiet. "Sweetheart?" I said. My voice came out smaller than I expected. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. The casserole rattled slightly. I steadied it, embarrassed by the sound. Snow began to fall, not heavy, just a light drift, like the sky was dusting the morning. Tiny flakes settled on my coat sleeves, melting almost immediately. I glanced at the window again. The curtain was still now, perfectly still. I stepped back from the door, just a half step, as if that might change something, as if distance could turn a locked door into a mistake. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. I thought about the drive over, how I'd planned what I'd say. Nothing important, just normal things. How she looked tired last time I'd seen her. How I'd made too much food on purpose so she wouldn't have to cook. I knocked one last time. My hand lingered against the wood after, feeling the cold seep through. "I'm here," I said, quietly, as if the house needed reminding. Silence answered me. Not the awkward kind, the settled kind, the kind that has already made up its mind. The snow picked up slightly, flakes catching in my hair. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. The casserole had gone heavy in my arms, not from weight, from meaning. I realized then that no one was coming to the door. Not now, maybe not today, maybe not for a while. This wasn't a missed call. It wasn't oversleeping. It wasn't a misunderstanding that would smooth itself out if I waited long enough. The lock hadn't changed by accident. I looked at the door again, really looked at it, at the small scratch near the bottom where she'd once dropped her keys, at the faded reef hook we never used. I wondered when it had happened, when the decision had been made, who had stood on this same porch and turned a key the other way. My hands were numb now. I hadn't noticed the cold until it was already there. I set the casserole down gently on the porch bench. The wood was cold beneath it, too cold. Snow settled on the foil, soft and quiet. For a moment, I considered leaving it there, letting it sit, proof that I'd come. But I picked it back up. Some things aren't meant to be left unattended. I stepped down from the porch, each step slower than the last. I didn't look back until I reached the driveway. The house stood unchanged, patient. The door stayed closed. I felt something loosen inside me then, not break, just shift, like realizing a room you've lived in your whole life has been rearranged while you were gone. I didn't know why my daughter had shut me out, only that she had. Snow continued to fall, already beginning to erase my footprints. The snow didn't fall all at once. It drifted, like it wasn't in a hurry to be noticed. I sat down on the front steps because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Not suddenly, just quietly, the way strength leaves when it thinks you're done using it. The wood beneath me was cold through my coat. The steps had always been uneven. He'd promised to fix them years ago. Never did. Snow settled into the grooves of the boards, tracing lines I'd stepped over 1,000 times. Each flake softened the edges, filled in the cracks, covered what time had worn down. I rested the casserole beside me, didn't look at it. I knew it was cold now. The house stood still behind me, no sound from inside, no movement at the window, just the door, closed, final in its quiet way. A car passed slowly on the street, tires whispering over wet pavement. The driver didn't look over, or maybe they did and I missed it. Another neighbor walked by, scarf pulled high, hands in pockets. Her eyes stayed forward. I watched her boots leave clean prints, then blur as the snow kept falling. Everyone moving, no one stopping. I tried to remember the last thing my daughter said to me. Not the big things, the small ones. Drive safe. Let me know when you get home. Things you say when nothing is wrong. We'd stood in her kitchen. She'd been stirring something on the stove, not looking at me. I'd noticed her shoulders were tight, asked if she was tired. She'd said, "I'm fine," too quickly. I believed her, because believing her was easier than asking again. The snow tapped softly against my coat sleeve, melted, left dark spots that slowly faded. I replayed that moment over and over, like rewinding a tape that wouldn't give me anything new. Was there a pause I ignored? A look I missed? A sentence she didn't finish? I searched for the exact second things shifted, the way you search for the first crack in ice after you've fallen through. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I pulled it out, screen lighting up too bright against the gray morning. No messages, no missed calls. I refreshed anyway, as if time might apologize and rearrange itself. Nothing. I watched my breath fog in front of me, watched it disappear. The snow kept coming, gentle and steady. It gathered along the edge of the porch, on the railing, on the casserole lid, softened everything. I wondered how long I could sit there before someone asked me to move, or before the snow made the decision for me. The house had always been loud when she was growing up. Music through open windows, doors slamming, laughter that spilled outside whether we wanted it to or not. Now it felt sealed, like sound itself wasn't allowed in. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped together. My fingers were stiff, red at the knuckles. I thought about knocking again, just once more, but I didn't. because something told me knocking wouldn't change what had already been decided. A bus went by, then another car, life continuing in small, ordinary ways. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. The quiet pressed in, not heavy, just persistent, the kind that asks questions without words. Eventually, I knew I couldn't stay there. Snow doesn't wait for grief to finish. I stood up slowly, my knees protested. I steadied myself on the railing, my hands sliding along cold paint. That's when I saw it. Near the corner of the top step, where the wood dipped slightly, something darker showed through the snow. Not wood, not shadow. I crouched down, closer. The cold seeped into my legs. I brushed at the snow with my glove, careful, almost apologetic. The shape didn't move at first. Then a corner appeared. Paper. I paused. The snow clung stubbornly, like it didn't want to give this thing up. I brushed again, slower. An envelope emerged, flattened, damp at the edges, pressed into the step as if it had been there long enough to belong. My name was written on it, careful, uneven, not my daughter's handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment, my breath caught somewhere between inhale and exhale. The world felt very still then, like everything else had stepped back. I didn't pick it up right away. I looked at the door, at the window, at the quiet house. Had it been there when I arrived? Had I stepped over it without seeing? The thought made my chest tighten. I finally slid my fingers under the envelope. The paper was cold, slightly soft. Snow clung to the back of it, refusing to let go. I turned it over once, then again. My name looked strange written like that, as if someone else had been holding it in their mouth before setting it down. I slipped it into my coat pocket without opening it. Some things don't ask to be read right away. I picked up the casserole. The foil was dotted with melted snow now. Cold seeped through the towel. I took one last look at the steps, at the place where the envelope had been hiding. Snow was already beginning to fill the space again, erasing the outline. I walked back to my car slowly. The snow followed me, light and patient. When I opened the door, warmth rushed out, fogging the windshield slightly. I sat there for a moment before turning the key. The house stayed quiet behind me. As I pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't trust myself to. The envelope pressed against my side, a small weight I couldn't ignore. Whatever it held had waded through the snow, and now it was coming home with me. The corner showed itself slowly, not all at once, just a darker shape beneath the ice, like something trying not to be seen. I had already turned away once, taken 3 steps down from the porch. My breath had settled into that shallow rhythm you get when you're pretending you're fine. Then I saw it. At the edge of the top step, where the wood dipped slightly from years of weather, a sharp line broke the white. Too straight to be shadow, too still to be a leaf. I stopped. The cold crept up through the soles of my boots. For a moment, I told myself it was nothing. Winter leaves all kinds of things behind. Receipts, flyers, scraps of the ordinary. But my feet carried me back before I finished the thought. I crouched slowly, joints stiff, coat pulling tight across my shoulders. The porch felt closer down there, lower, like I was being invited into something small and quiet. Snow had iced over the step, thin but stubborn. I pressed my glove against it, brushing carefully, as if the wood itself might feel it. The snow gave a little, then resisted. My fingers were numb, but I kept brushing, slow, patient. The paper appeared in pieces, first the edge, then a fold, pressed flat, as if someone had smoothed it down with care. An envelope. I stopped moving. The cold bit harder now that I was still. My knees trembled slightly, whether from the crouch or from something else, I couldn't tell. I brushed again, gentler this time. The snow slid away in thin sheets, revealing damp paper underneath. The envelope was off-white once. Now it looked tired, softened by moisture, heavy with waiting. My name was written across the front. Not neat, not confident. The letters leaned slightly, as if the hand that wrote them hadn't known where to rest. The ink had bled a little at the edges, blurred by snow and time. I knew immediately it wasn't my daughter's handwriting. I'd known her writing since she was 5, back when letters went backward and her name barely fit on the page. This was different, older, careful in a way that comes from fear, not politeness. I sat back on my heels, the envelope still half buried. Snowflakes landed on it, melting instantly, like the sky didn't know what it was touching. For a long moment, I didn't reach for it. There are things you can leave alone if you don't acknowledge them. A noise in the house, a thought that comes too late at night. I thought about standing up, walking away, letting the snow finish what it had started. If I didn't touch it, it wouldn't be mine yet. The house behind me stayed quiet. No footsteps, no door opening, no voice calling my name. Just the faint creak of the porch as the cold settled deeper into the wood. I imagined someone kneeling here before me, their coat brushing the same boards, their breath fogging the same air, placing the envelope carefully, pressing it down so the wind wouldn't take it, so I would have to see it. My fingers hovered over the paper. They shook slightly. I told myself I was cold. That was all. I slid my fingers under the edge of the envelope and lifted. It came free with a soft sound, like paper tearing away from memory. Snow clung to the back of it, refusing to let go. I turned it over once, then again. My name looked strange written like that, as if someone else had been holding it in their mouth before setting it down. I slipped it into my coat pocket without opening it. Some things don't ask to be read right away. I picked up the casserole. The foil was dotted with melted snow now. Cold seeped through the towel. I took one last look at the steps, at the place where the envelope had been hiding. Snow was already beginning to fill the space again, erasing the outline. I walked back to my car slowly. The snow followed me, light and patient. When I opened the door, warmth rushed out, fogging the windshield slightly. I sat there for a moment before turning the key. The house stayed quiet behind me. As I pulled away, I didn't look back. I didn't trust myself to. The envelope pressed against my side, a small weight I couldn't ignore. Whatever it held had waded through the snow, and now it was coming home with me. The corner showed itself slowly, not all at once, just a darker shape beneath the ice, like something trying not to be seen. I had already turned away once, taken 3 steps down from the porch. My breath had settled into that shallow rhythm you get when you're pretending you're fine. Then I saw it. At the edge of the top step, where the wood dipped slightly from years of weather, a sharp line broke the white, too straight to be shadow, too still to be a leaf. I stopped. The cold crept up through the soles of my boots. For a moment, I told myself it was nothing. Winter leaves all kinds of things behind. Receipts, flyers, scraps of the ordinary. But my feet carried me back before I finished the thought. I crouched slowly, joints stiff, coat pulling tight across my shoulders. The porch felt closer down there, lower, like I was being invited into something small and quiet. Snow had iced over the step. Then, but stubborn, I pressed my glove against it, brushing carefully, as if the wood itself might feel it. The snow gave a little, then resisted. My fingers were numb, but I kept brushing, slow, patient. The paper appeared in pieces, first the edge, then a fold, pressed flat as if someone had smoothed it down with care. An envelope. I stopped moving. The cold bit harder now that I was still. My knees trembled slightly, whether from the crouch or from something else, I couldn't tell. I brushed again, gentler this time. The snow slid away in thin sheets, revealing damp paper underneath. The envelope was off-white once. Now it looked tired, softened by moisture, heavy with waiting. My name was written across the front. Not neat, not confident. The letters leaned slightly, as if the hand that wrote them hadn't known where to rest. The ink had bled a little at the edges, blurred by snow and time. I knew immediately it wasn't my daughter's handwriting. I'd known her writing since she was 5, back when letters went backward and her name barely fit on the page. This was different, older, careful in a way that comes from fear, not politeness. I sat back on my heels, the envelope still half buried. Snowflakes landed on it, melting instantly, like the sky didn't know what it was touching. For a long moment, I didn't reach for it. There are things you can leave alone if you don't acknowledge them. A noise in the house, a thought that comes too late at night. I thought about standing up, walking away, letting the snow finish what it had started. If I didn't touch it, it wouldn't be mine yet. The house behind me stayed silent. No footsteps, no door opening, no voice calling my name. Just the faint creak of the porch as the cold settled deeper into the wood. I imagined someone kneeling here before me, their coat brushing the same boards, their breath fogging the same air, placing the envelope carefully, pressing it down so the wind wouldn't take it, so I would have to see it. My fingers hovered over the paper. They shook slightly. I told myself I was cold, that was all. I slid my fingers under the edge of the envelope and lifted. It came free with a soft sound, like paper tearing away from memory. Snow clung to the back, stubborn, reluctant to let go. The envelope sagged slightly in my hand, damp but intact. I turned it over once, then again. No return address, no stamp, just my name. Seeing it like that, written by someone else, left in the cold, made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't expected. Names carry weight when they're written with intention, when someone takes the time to form each letter, knowing it might be the only thing you see. I considered opening it right there, right on the porch, letting the cold read it with me, but my hands were too numb, and some truths don't belong outside. I looked again at the spot where it had been resting, the shallow groove in the wood, the way the snow had molded itself around it. Had it been there when I first arrived? Had I stepped over it without noticing? The thought unsettled me. How many things do we miss because we're looking at doors instead of steps? I slipped the envelope into my coat pocket, pressing it flat against my side. The paper felt colder than the air. For a moment, I rested my hand there, palm over my heart, like I was keeping it from moving. I stood slowly, my knees complaining. The porch groaned softly beneath my weight. Snow was already drifting back into the empty space, filling it in, covering the outline where the envelope had been. It would be gone soon, like it had never waited there at all. I picked up the casserole, adjusting my grip. The towel was damp now, cold soaked through. The house loomed behind me, blue paint dulled by winter light, curtains still. I didn't knock again. I stepped off the porch and onto the path, my boots leaving prints that filled almost as soon as they formed. The envelope pressed against my ribs as I walked, each step reminding me it was there. Not heavy, just present. By the time I reached the car, my fingers burned with returning warmth, that sharp ache that follows numbness. I sat inside with the door closed, the world suddenly muted. Snow tapped softly against the windshield. I pulled the envelope out and rested it on my lap. Didn't open it. The paper had wrinkled slightly at the corners. It smelled faintly of damp wood and cold air. I traced my name with my thumb. The ink was dry now. Whatever was written inside had already survived the night. The The snow, the waiting. I folded the envelope carefully and placed it in my bag, beneath my gloves. Some things aren't meant to be read where they're found. I started the car. The engine's hum felt too loud, too ordinary. As I pulled away, I glanced once in the mirror. The porch was already smoothing itself over, snow reclaiming its quiet. But I knew better now. Once you see something buried, it doesn't stay hidden for long. The house sounded different when I came back. Not louder exactly, just less forgiving. The door closed behind me with a soft thud that echoed longer than it should have. I stood there, coat still on, keys in my hand, listening as the sound settled into the walls. The letter stayed tucked in my bag until I reached the kitchen. I didn't rush. I took my shoes off, hung my coat the way I always did. Routine is a way of asking the world to stay normal. I set the envelope on the kitchen table, right in the center, where the light from the window landed. The paper looked out of place there, too quiet, too intentional, like something that knew it didn't belong but was staying anyway. I didn't touch it again. The kettle went on out of habit. Water poured. The flame clicked alive. The clock above the sink ticked steadily, each second announcing itself. I'd never noticed how sharp it sounded before. The pipes knocked somewhere in the walls as the heat shifted, a low groan, a reminder that the house was awake now. I leaned against the counter and watched steam begin to rise from the kettle's spout. Thin at first, then thicker. My breathing felt too present, too loud in my ears. I kept glancing at the table. The envelope hadn't moved. It didn't need to. I poured the water over a tea bag and watched the color bloom slowly, spreading through the cup like something waking up. I carried it to the table, careful not to bump anything. The envelope sat between me and the empty chair across the table. The chair my daughter used to sit in when she came home from school. The one she'd rocked back on until I told her to stop. I wrapped my hands around the mug. The heat was comforting but distant, like it was meant for someone else. I didn't drink. I stared at the envelope instead. The paper had dried some, but the edges were still soft. The fold was uneven, pressed too tightly in places. I wondered how long it had been out there. Overnight? Longer? Snow preserves things, slows them down, keeps them waiting. A memory came without asking. She was small, maybe 6 or 7, standing at this same table with a pencil clenched in her fist, tongue caught between her teeth as she tried to write her name straight. "Slow down," I'd said gently. "Letters don't like to be rushed." She'd looked up at me then, eyes serious. "I don't want it to look wrong." I smiled at the memory now, felt it settle somewhere behind my ribs. I shook my head slightly, as if to clear it, but the memories kept coming. Her boots by the door, always muddy, the sound of her running down the hallway, the way she used to leave notes on the fridge, crooked hearts and misspelled words. I wondered when notes stopped being left. The clock ticked on. I reached out, then stopped short of touching the envelope. My fingers hovered above it, close enough to feel the coolness rising from the paper. There are moments when you know something will change once you cross a line, once you look too closely, once you know. I pulled my hand back. The tea had gone untouched. A thin film formed on the surface. I pushed my chair back and stood, restless, moved to the sink, then back again. The envelope followed me with my eyes. I told myself I'd open it later, after I'd warmed up, after I'd eaten something. But I didn't make food. Instead, I wiped the counter that was already clean, adjusted the curtains, straightened a stack of mail, anything but the letter. The house seemed to notice. The clock grew louder. The refrigerator hummed unevenly. Even the floor creaked beneath my feet, like it remembered how to complain. I sat down again, slower this time. The envelope hadn't changed, but I had. I wondered who wrote it, who knew my name well enough to write it like that. Careful, but unsure. I thought of my daughter's husband, of neighbors, of people who had watched quietly while I wasn't looking. The thought made my stomach tighten. Another memory surfaced. She was older then, teenage, standing in this kitchen with her arms crossed, jaw set. "You don't have to worry so much," she'd said. "I'm your mother," I'd replied. "That's what I do." She hadn't smiled. I hadn't understood why at the time. I pressed my lips together now, tasting that old conversation like something slightly bitter. The envelope stayed closed. What kind of truth waits patiently? Does it grow heavier the longer you ignore it? Or does it soften, hoping you'll be gentle when you finally pick it up? Snow was still falling outside. I could see it through the window, drifting past the bare branches, quiet, persistent. I imagined the envelope out there again, pressed into the wood, waiting for me to notice. My tea was cold now. I lifted the mug and took a small sip anyway. It tasted thin, unfinished. I set it down and reached for the envelope at last. Not to open it, just to move it. I slid it closer to me, turned it so my name faced upward. Seeing it like that made my throat tighten. I traced the first letter lightly with my fingertip, didn't press. The paper felt fragile, like it might tear if I wasn't careful. I pulled my hand back again. Not yet. Some truths need quiet, and I wasn't quiet enough yet. I stood and carried the envelope to the other end of the table, setting it near the window where the light was softer. It looked smaller there, less demanding. I rinsed the mug and set it in the rack. The sound of water running was brief, but grounding. When I turned back, the letter waited, patient. I knew I wouldn't sleep much that night, that the envelope would sit there in the dark, holding its breath. I turned off the kitchen light. The paper caught the last bit of gray from outside, barely visible, waiting under snow, waiting under silence. And I knew, when I finally opened it, nothing would sound the same again. I waited until the house had gone still again, not asleep, just settled. Night pressed gently against the windows, turning them into dark mirrors. The clock kept time in the kitchen, steady and unbothered like it always had. I sat at the table with the letter in front of me, same place as before, same light, only dimmer. The envelope looked thinner than it had that morning, as if it had already given something up. I rested my hands on either side of it and stayed that way for a while, listening to the refrigerator hum, to the faint creak of the floor as the house cooled. When I finally touched the envelope, my fingers hesitated at the edge. The paper was dry now, but stiff. Cold still lived in it. I slid my finger beneath the flap. The paper tore slightly, not loud, just a small sound, like fabric giving way. I froze, guilt blooming sharp and sudden, as if I had hurt something that couldn't speak. The tear widened as I opened it the rest of the way. The envelope gave up its shape, sagging in my hand. Inside, the letter was folded once, carefully, deliberately. I unfolded it slowly. The paper cracked faintly along the crease. Winter still held on. The handwriting was steadier than it had looked on the outside, still careful, still unsure. The first line didn't accuse, it apologized. "I'm sorry to do this in a way that feels unkind." I stopped there, read it again, then once more. The words sat heavy on the page, like they'd been weighed down before being written. I kept reading. The letter didn't rush. It explained itself gently, like someone afraid of raising their voice. It said there had been conversations I wasn't part of, decisions made quietly, late at night, when everyone was tired and wanted peace more than clarity. This seems like the safest way, it said. For her. For her. I felt my jaw tighten. The letter talked around things instead of naming them, used careful phrases, soft edges, boundaries, space, time to settle. Words that sound reasonable when you don't say what they're protecting you from. My eyes moved slower now. It said I caused tension, that old wounds reopened when I was near, that silence had been suggested, not forever, just until things calmed down, for her own good. I read that line twice, then again. I didn't remember agreeing to any of this. The paper trembled slightly as my hands began to shake. I hadn't noticed when it started. The letter didn't sound cruel. That was the hardest part. It sounded afraid. It spoke of not wanting to hurt me, of knowing how much I loved her, of hoping I would understand. "Please don't come by for now," it read. "It only makes things harder." Harder for who? I swallowed and kept reading. Near the bottom, the handwriting tightened, the lines closer together. She needs calm. She needs quiet. She needs distance. Distance. From me. I stared at the page until the words blurred. Memories pressed in without asking. Her first day of school, clutching my hand too tight. Her teenage years, doors closed harder than necessary. Her wedding day, smiling but watchful, like she was bracing for something. Had I been louder than I realized? Heavier? The letter reached its end without ceremony, no signature, just a final sentence written smaller than the rest. This is the only way we knew how. I lowered the paper onto the table. My hands stayed raised, fingers curled slightly as if still holding it. The kitchen felt different now, smaller, sharper. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Who decided I was the danger? The question didn't arrive angry. It arrived tired. I replayed my words over the years. Advice I'd given without being asked. Concern that might have sounded like judgment. I thought about all the times I'd said, "I just want what's best for you." The words echoed differently now. I picked the letter back up and read it from the beginning, slower. There was no hatred in it, no malice, just fear. Fear wrapped in politeness. Fear asking me to stay away quietly so no one would have to explain too much. I noticed then what the letter didn't say. It didn't say she wanted this. It didn't quote her voice. It spoke for her. I closed my eyes. The house shifted around me, pipes knocking softly, wood contracting, normal sounds, suddenly too present. I folded the letter carefully, pressing along the crease where it had torn. The paper didn't go back to how it was. I placed it beside my cold tea mug, both unfinished. Outside, snow brushed against the window again, light, persistent. I imagined my daughter sitting somewhere warm, quiet, listening to someone else decide what peace looked like. The thought settled deep, slow and heavy. I didn't cry, not then. I sat there instead, feeling the space where certainty used to be. The letter had said enough to change things, but not enough to explain them. I turned off the kitchen light and left the paper where it lay. In the dark, it looked pale, almost fragile. Words written in winter have a way of staying cold, and I knew this silence hadn't started with me, but it was asking me to carry it anyway. I read the letter again in the morning light, not for the apology this time, not for the careful language. I read it for what wasn't said. There was a line I'd skimmed past the night before, just one sentence tucked neatly between softer ones. He believes this is best. Not his name, not even a title, just he, the one who speaks for the house now. I sat at the table longer than necessary, my hands wrapped around nothing. The kitchen felt whiter in daylight, less forgiving. I thought back through small moments, so small I'd once dismissed them as marriage, as growing up. The way he answered questions meant for her, the way she'd glance at him before speaking, how her smiles came late, if at all. I remembered asking her once if she was happy. She'd nodded, but she hadn't looked at me. At the time, I told myself it was adulthood, distance, and new life. Now I wondered if it had been protection. I thought of all the times I'd stepped back, proud of myself for not interfering, proud of her independence. Maybe I hadn't been respectful. Maybe I'd just been absent when it mattered. Authority doesn't arrive loudly, it settles in, quiet as snow, and by the time you notice it, the house no longer answers to you. I went back the next day. The snow had been cleared from the steps, every trace of me gone. The porch looked ordinary again, like nothing had happened. I stood there with the letter folded in my coat pocket, feeling foolish for expecting something different. The door was the same, the lock unchanged. I knocked once, then waited. I imagined her on the other side, standing the way she used to during storms, still, listening, counting seconds between thunder. She'd been afraid of loud weather as a child. Just wait it out, I used to tell her. The house stayed silent. I didn't knock again. Instead, I leaned close enough to hear the quiet inside. Nothing moved, not even the floor. If she heard me now, why didn't she speak? I stepped back, heart beating slower than it should. Love doesn't always ask for answers. Sometimes it learns when to leave. I turned away before the question could grow teeth. I was halfway down the path when Mrs. Calder called my name. Her voice was low, careful. She stood at the edge of her yard, hands folded over her coat, eyes not quite meeting mine. We'd waved for years without ever talking much. She hesitated before speaking, then said, "I wondered when you'd come back." She told me about nights when the lights stayed on too late, about raised voices that carried farther than they should, about the way my daughter stopped waving back. She didn't say abuse, but she didn't have to. Some words live in the pause before they're spoken. I nodded, listening, feeling something settle heavily in my chest. The town had known more than I had, or maybe they'd only known what they could bear. "How is she?" I asked. Mrs. Calder sighed. "She's quiet. Quiet isn't always peace." As I walked away, I realized how much people carry when no one asks. Back home, I read the letter again. This time, I saw the sentence I'd missed. "Please don't come back yet. Your presence makes things worse." Worse. I sat with that word for a long time. To be both mother and threat is a strange kind of grief. Loving someone doesn't always mean staying close. Sometimes it means becoming smaller, quieter. I thought about everything I wanted to say and didn't, everything I wanted to do and couldn't. Leaving felt like abandonment. Staying felt like danger. I folded the letter and placed it back in the drawer. Some choices don't come with relief, only responsibility. If distance kept her safe, then distance it would be. I whispered her name once into the empty room. Then I stayed where I was. Winter deepened. I didn't go back to the house. I wrote letters instead. Dozens of them, none sent. Each snowfall felt heavier than the last, as if truth itself was being buried layer by layer. I wondered if she knew I'd found the letter, if it had been meant for me, or just placed where guilt could reach me. The silence stretched, then settled. Some silences scream, others simply wait. I learned how long days can be when you stop checking the clock, how quiet hope can become when it's afraid of disappointing you. Snow has a way of teaching patience, or surrender. I wasn't sure which I was learning. Spring arrived quietly. One morning, my phone rang. I knew her voice before she said my name. Soft, careful, the way she sounded when she was little and unsure if she was in trouble. "Mom," she said, Just that. She didn't explain everything. I didn't ask. Some truths don't need to be pulled into the light to be real. We spoke in pauses, in breaths, in things left unsaid. Some doors reopen slowly, some never fully do. But some things, once uncovered, can't be buried again. And even now, not everything is locked.